Hey guys, it's Corey Wilkins with Ears Only Audio. I hope you are doing very well. Um, as always, if you like what you see in here, please do hit that subscribe button. And also, if you notice in the description today, there's something a little bit new, which is a link to my PayPal. If you really like what you're seeing and hearing, and you feel like you've learned something and got a little bit of value, and you'd like to make a donation to the studio, that would be cool. I'd really appreciate it. If you don't, that's also totally fine. So, is what I want to talk about today is sort of session organization and efficiency and committing to something to make your life so much easier later on down the road. So, is what we did today is we were tracking drums in the studio, as you can probably see. And on this drum kit, I had 12 microphones. Kick in and out, snare top and bottom, 4 toms, 2 overheads, and 2 rooms. So that is a lot of microphones. It's a lot of faders to have to manage. It's a lot of things to have to think about, especially like later on when you go to mix down and you've also got, half a dozen guitars and maybe some keyboards and lead vocals and harmonies and all these other things. And it can really make the process confusing. So is what I've started doing is thinking of it more more like if I were tracking kind of analog and with outboard gear, and I actually picked up some of this stuff too, some of the organization stuff from Chris Lord Alge, who is one of my favorite mixers. And he's always talking about, getting things onto as few faders as possible that still make sense. So, is what I have done is gotten all of my drums, all 12 microphones, onto 5 faders. So it's just a matter of, now you can do this by just like subgrouping things, setting the outputs and whatever, but then, and then you can hide your original ones, but then you still have problems if you want stuff in solo at any point. You really have to manage which tracks you're solo safing and all these kinds of things. And everything like that is just a pain in the ass to have to think about when you're just trying to go through a mix. And I am a firm believer, along with many other mixers who are much better than I am, that you're really mixing against the clock. The clock is your enemy when you're mixing. You want to be able to sit down. You want to be able to be quick and instinctual. You don't want to have to be sitting around going, okay, now it is time to EQ the third of 4 toms, right? So is what I did is I actually grouped. So I set up a submix bus for my 2 kick drums, another one for my 2 snare drums, another one for my 4 toms, another one for my 2 overheads, and another one for my 2 rooms. Then, since I'm really crazy, I decided that I wanted to commit even further, so I actually added some processing to all of those submix buses. It's very little. It's reminiscent of what you might track with if you had outboard gear that you were tracking through. Like if you had channel strips or a console or something like that you were tracking through. How would you treat it on the way in? And there's a real specific reason that I did this. So most of what I did is, certain things had some high pass filtering. The vast majority of the EQ that I did was subtractive, just finding the frequencies that did not sound as good and I knew I was not going to want to use in the overall sound. Because if I'm tracking through channel strips that have EQ on them, I'm obviously going to do that, right? I'm gonna find the sounds where the it's the most nasty, where the room is the most involved in a non-complimentary way, and I'm gonna kind of pull those out a little bit. Okay, so I did that. On my rooms, I track them as if I had also tracked them through a compressor and compressed them pretty heavily, like if I did it on the way in. Then, since I'm even crazier, I bounced all those down. All of my submix buses, I bounced down. Then I went and I re-imported them into Pro Tools. The bounce tracks that I got with my treatment that I had done, my subtractive EQ and the compression on the rooms. Then I hid and made inactive all of my drum tracks. So now I have drums on just 5 faders. 12 microphones gets down to 5 faders. So I might kick in and out on 1 fader. Now it's not a submix bus, it's an audio track. So I can just go ahead and solo it up, no problem. My snare top, snare bottom. I've already flipped the phase on the bottom. It's not something I have to worry about in the mix process. It's already done. If I would have had an external mic pre, I would have flipped the phase on it going in. My 4 toms, I took out some nasty honky mid-range and made sure that they were pretty well level balanced so that one tom wouldn't be significantly louder than the other. Bounced down my tom bus. Overhead, same thing. Rooms, same thing, except I added some compression. So what I want to do right now is take a look inside of Pro Tools and see what it looks like. Alright, so as you can probably see here in this Pro Tools session, we have a scratch guitar, we have a scratch vocal, we have a kick, we have a snare, we have toms, we have overheads, and we have rooms. So yeah, I've condensed this drum kit down quite a bit. But it all makes sense. So I've already determined the balance that I'm pretty sure that I want between my kick in and my kick out. Alright? I still have them, like I said, they're hidden, but I still have them in my session if I ever decide that I want my balance to be a little bit different. So let's check out what we got here. So like when you listen to that kick drum in solo, you can tell that it's already been treated somewhat. It sounds like it was just treated on the way in. Which, for all intents and purposes at this point it was. We sucked out some mid-range. We gave a tiny little bit of a boost, not as much as I might use in the whole mix, but since I don't know how dense this mix is, I don't know how much like 4K I'm going to need or how much AK I'm going to need on that kick drum. Those are my 2 favorite frequencies in the top end of the kick drum to boost. I love 4K and I love 8K, but I don't know how much I'm going to need. So I just gave it a little because like this sounds pretty good. If the song doesn't get too horrifically dense, that might be enough, and I might not have to EQ it at all in the mix. If the song does get really dense and the kick drum isn't jumping out of the mix at me, I may need to add a little bit extra 4K or 8K or both. No big deal. The snare drum, same thing. I actually didn't boost the top end on the snare as much, but I did take out a bunch of mid-range, a little bit of the sort of hum that you can get with snare drums. And I mean, like, if you're a mix engineer, that's a pretty damn fine, like, if you were receiving this track, that's a pretty damn fine snare sound. So when I go to mix, that's going to be my starting point. That wasn't my starting point when I actually tracked, but I took my time to take a couple extra steps to act like I tracked it that way. And the same thing, look at our toms here. Oh, look, I've muted them already. So I've already got all, I don't have to worry about gates or anything like that when I'm mixing on my toms. It's all done already. So I don't have to do any of that sort of thinking stuff, any of that technical stuff when I get to the mix process. Here's my overheads. I think anybody would be happy, again, if this were going out to a different mix engineer, I think anybody would be happy with that sound for the starting point for their overheads. Again, I took out some lower mid-range, and I took out some upper mid-range, like maybe around 3.5K, 4K, somewhere in there where you get that real harshness from the cymbals. I just pulled out maybe 2.5 dB, no big deal. I can always pull out more, but if I need to. So everything I did when I sort of committed, and that's what this is really all about, is committing. Saying, you know, this is what I am going to do. I am going to commit to this specific sound. I know it's what I want. I'm not going to save all of the really highly technical decisions for the mixing process when I want to be making musical decisions. Here's my rooms. I know I'm going to compress my rooms to get more of the room sound out of them. 1176, all buttons in, fastest attack, fastest release. We're going 7 and 7, baby, and hitting it pretty hard. So check it out. And I'm perfectly happy with this sound. I don't want to be safe. I don't want to say, oh, you know, I can always make up my mind later. I can always treat it later. Screw that. Right? Let's get into it. Let's make some decisions early in the process so that when it comes time to mix, we're making the aesthetic decisions rather than the technical. Yeah, let's not snare. Obviously, yeah, rooms, pretty crushed. Cool. But let me just mute the scratch tracks here. And here's just the overall drum sound. Faders at 0, ready to rock and roll. I'm excited to mix a song where the drum sounds just starting out are going to sound like that. So, you know, obviously you may not choose to work this way, but if you do, it can really pay dividends as you get later along in the process. Kind of the more you inconvenience yourself now, the better, you know, earlier in the process, in the tracking phase. Or if you set aside a day for this kind of thing. The more you do that now and the more you commit earlier in the process, the better direction you have and the better final product you're going to get, in my opinion. So give it a try, see if you like doing it, send me a comment and let me know if it works for you or if you thought it was just kind of a waste of time and didn't help your workflow and you would never try it again. That's cool too. Like, you know, if there's 1,000 mixers in a room, there's 1,000 different ways to do something. And this just kind of works for me. And if I ever did want to send one of my songs that I worked on off to another mixer, or if I had an artist I was working with who wanted to send their song off that I recorded for them off to another mixer, I could do that and feel really happy with the starting point that I'm giving to that other mixer. So therefore, I'm really happy with the starting point that I'm giving to myself because I'm going to be mixing this record. So when it comes time for the mix phase of this, I'm excited to sit down and start dialing this in because it already sounds fantastic. All right, cool, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Corey Wilkins for Ears Only Audio. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can find out whenever I post some new videos. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.